been absolutely no violence whatsoever.
What happened to Floyd happens every day in this country.
It's been a heavy 2 weeks, a lot that we could discuss or react to.
It's something that I never thought that I would witness, be a part of.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of It's Your Time to Shine, a podcast about being a mom in a modern world. My name is Jaspreet Kaur, and with me is Lisa Vora.
Hey, Jess.
I'm so glad you were able to record today, Lisa.
Yeah, well, it has absolutely been crazy.
I have been on like an emotional roller coaster and a mental roller coaster of like trying to parse through information, trying to process and get to the point of having a position that I can even articulate, you know, how I feel, even to answer the question, how do you feel? And it's just been a roller coaster of emotion. And it's obviously an extremely vigorous time for African American Black community, but also for all people of color and for everyone. It's just like a lot of unsettled views and voices have been shared in the last couple of weeks, and I think so many of us are in shock on all sides of the experience.
It's like we've always known and we've seen protests. We've been watching police brutality against African Americans for years, but then the protests just kind of go away. Nothing really changes. And I have to say, for me too, I feel like even I didn't realize how bad it was. I don't know, not to say I was ignorant about this by any means, but I just didn't realize how systemic racism really is until now. I mean, all the social media, you're seeing the videos, you're seeing people explaining, you're seeing the talking heads. I didn't realize.
Yeah, absolutely. The pervasiveness of racism in every system is so deep. We can't even get a handle on it. The one thing that I kept on thinking about the last few days, knowing that you and I were going to talk today, is in the podcast that's out right now, you had mentioned Band-Aids.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And, you know, I asked my husband the other day because I was so upset by that. I know it's like a very small thing of like, you might be thinking, just Brie, of all the things to be upset about, that's what you chose. But, you know, I was saying to my husband, I was like, have you ever thought about the color of a Band-Aid? Like, it just makes me so mad just thinking about that.
That was exactly where I was when I first read an article, and that's where I got that. Like, an article mentioned the Band-Aid, and it made me so angry. And same as you. Like, why am I this angry? Am I being a baby? Like, what? You know? But there is something about that.
It's like paving the way for all people of color to immediately feel alienated and like we don't fully belong.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it. That's exactly how I felt. I actually was, right before our podcast, I was just watching a video Now This made about the Tulsa massacre, which I didn't know that much about until now. I mean, did you learn about that in history class? Because I didn't.
You know, I don't think I learned about it in history class, but I will say, like 2 years ago, I had a friend who married a guy from Oklahoma. And being in Texas, you know, you do meet quite a few people who might have grown up in Oklahoma and have come down to Texas.
Yeah.
And she mentioned to me the Oklahoma riots. And I said, I've never heard about them, or I don't recall learning anything about them. And she was like, she gave me an overview, but she was like, you should really read up about it because it's quite possibly the most terrifying story that I ever learned about. And this is an older white woman. And so for her to say that, I was just like really curious. And once I did the research on it, this was, like I said, about 2 years ago, I was just completely appalled and just completely like, when I saw the news of the upcoming planned rally, I just instantly was like, I cannot believe how brazen political parties and political movements are getting now.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I feel like I always knew a little bit, but I didn't really understand the extent to these riots. And watching this video right now and watching these pictures of these very affluent Black people and the way they were just torn down and killed, I was just stunned. Like, what the heck? you know?
Yeah.
And it's like,
yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it says everything. Like they made a life for themselves. They didn't need help from the government. They were doing really, really well. And you just, in one night, less than 100 years ago, might I add. It wasn't that long ago. In the grand scheme of history, it's very recent, you know?
Yeah, 99 years ago.
And you just came and you killed 300 people, and then they all had to move. Obviously, their whatever wealth they had was gone, and they had to start up. And now you get mad when we say reparations? Like, that pisses me off. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I think the thing that's hard is that it's so clearly unjust.
Yeah.
It's so one-sided and so wrong. And yet we're all in shock that it happened, and that it happened like,
Yeah, that's true.
you know, within a few generations of us.
Yeah, exactly.
Part of the just brazen unjustness and the wrongness is what has made it so difficult to even, one, figure out where we stand, and then two, figure out what to do next.
We can vote. That still, I will say, is the most important thing we can do.
I think, yeah, I can totally relate to that. And I think another part of it is like, okay, so voting and census, we're on that train for all of 2020.
Right.
Like anybody who knows us knows that we're supporting that.
Yeah.
I think having insight into motivating others in the community to understand the importance of their vote, and also to vote locally, I think is like something that I've been like thinking about quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And dialogue. How can we make
Yeah.
dialogue easy and
Yeah.
accessible to everyone?
Yeah.
And I say that like I've been struggling to have the conversation with my kids. Like it's been really hard. What do I say? Because I find myself just crying,
Yeah.
or not able to make the, like, not be able to form the right sentences. And last podcast I told you that I had shown Amrik, my son, the video of Amy Cooper and Christian Cooper. And we talked a little bit about privilege, you know, and how certain words have become like criminalized. When she was like, I'm going to say that there is a black man threatening me. And so he totally got that. And so she knew exactly what she was doing. And watching the video together made it easy to have the conversation. I said this before, because the guy fared fine. He didn't get beat up. He didn't get, nothing happened to him. All of the stories since then have been weighing so heavy on me because people didn't make it out alive.
Yeah, and that watching George Floyd's video, it's just too heartbreaking. I saw it only once by mistake because these things get to me, and it has been tattooed into my head, that video. So I can see not wanting to watch that video with your children. Yeah.
Yes, and when he said, and I would never, voluntarily watch anything like that with him.
Yeah.
I also have difficulty sleeping and have nightmares and things. So Budum usually watches things first and then will tell me like, oh, you should definitely not watch that. But that one I did watch. And when he cries, mama, mama, and I thought like, look at his size and look at his age. And he didn't even call for God. He like called for his mom. My heart was just gushing. Like, I can't imagine what that's like. I can't imagine it. And I can't imagine, like, honestly, we say as women of color, we have additional scrutiny, that sometimes it feels like the system's a little bit rigged for women or for women of color. And I cannot imagine that feeling, the fear of that happening, which is very real for all of the Black moms out there every day. And dads, moms and dads.
Yeah, to have the talk with their children. And I've never been scared. For me, like, I have that privilege. I'm not scared. If a cop stops me, I'm not worried that the cop's going to kill me. So like you just said,
right.
We will never understand that feeling of a black man. Of black people, especially male, being stopped by a cop and wondering if this is going to be his last breath. And I'll tell you a story about a good friend of ours from like a few years ago. It's about a while ago. It must have been at least early 2000s. So we were supposed to go. I don't remember the context around that story at all. And that's the thing. That's what shows me that moment had such an impact, because I don't remember what happened around it. But I think we were going to Texas or something was going on. And somehow we talked about police stopping, or maybe I was talking about, I'm going to go fast and the police stopping you. And then he's like, well, make sure the police doesn't kill you. And I was like, please police isn't going to kill me. And then he said right after that, oh, that's right, police would kill me. And I was like, oh, that's just dumb. Like, police isn't going to kill you for speeding. And he's like, are you sure about that? Are you a black person in America? And I looked at him, and he never really showed me too much attitude. Like, we were always cool. But I remember that moment. I don't know why I never forgot that moment, because it was the first time someone opened my eyes that this is a reality for them. To constantly be scared that a cop is going to kill you. For a mother and a father of black children to have to speak to them about how they could get killed by cops, and their fear, like you just said, about not knowing whether their kid will come back home because of police brutality. You know, so it just made me think about now as an adult. I mean, I was still an adult 20 years ago because that's how old I am. But I'm not trying to blame the whole thing on our educational system. But I do think that we learn too much. We learn enough about what happened, how it happened, but we really, really learn it in context of history. And I think that's what's changed. And it's not. It's systemic racism and what the impacts are today. And I guess for me, it took a personal connection to open my eyes. And I have to wonder about how many people get that personal connection to start to at least think about these things.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you're raising one of the positives of all of the change, and what's happening is that so many folks who never had insight into what it's like, into the blatant disregard for human life,
right,
you know, into that idea.
Exactly.
Like, if we just think for a minute, like any one of us, even if we were like, I'm gonna get like real extreme but real example, okay, the keeping it real parenting. Even if I was in a public setting, like in a grocery store, and I started yelling at my kid for doing something wrong, if someone's videotaping me, I would think twice about, you know, smacking their bottom or slapping their hand or something, right?
Right.
And think about like killing another person on video with a crowd watching.
Think about the arrogance too.
Yes, such a blatant disregard for the humanity of that life.
Yeah, that you really do think you are just better than that person.
Yeah. Or that you think you're justified in your actions.
Yeah.
And there's no reason that they wouldn't think that, because now that we're starting to peek under the covers of police brutality and blatant abuse of power, whether it's sexual abuse, verbal abuse, whatever it is, physical abuse, we see statistically they've been trained to behave that way.
They have, as predators, right? Like, you guys are predators. I saw something, I think it was John Oliver, about that, about how they're taught to be predators, that they're taught to be above the law. They're not taught to be there to help and keep the peace in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the big difference. And so there's so much information out there right now. I've been having like a really tough time sorting through all of it. One thing that stands out in my mind is someone had shared, and this is social media, so I'm going to, full disclosure, I didn't go and check any of the sources, but it was about Norway and Sweden and Finland, and how they've had like relatively few deaths at the hand of the police in the last 10 years. And when I say few, I mean like under 20 in 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And the reason for that is twofold. One is that their training is very, very extensive, and they're taught how to de-escalate situations. And two, their charter is not to fill up the prisons and keep this, you know, school to prison system going, but they are actually motivated to have little crime and work as little as possible. And so it's in their best interest for people to, like, they break up arguments and they're like, hey, don't do the wrong thing. Thank you. We all want to go home now.
They're doing what police should be doing. It is all about the training. We should allocate the money to other things, mental health, education. Definitely, we should. But like also towards training, like real training, not the kind of training that police is seeing right now, where it's like, you guys are like, awesome, this is a movie, and go get your guns and do what you want to do. Proper training to teach people and to bring people in with more critical thinking skills, and to think, like you just said, de-escalate a situation. Use that to do it. It's so easy to be a police officer. I have an old friend in New York, and we're really good friends about I don't know. Again, 15, 20 years ago. Everyone was my friend 15, 20. Anyway, 15, 20 years ago.
When you had all these friends.
I did. So he moved to New York and he's like, I'm going to be a cop. And I was like, okay. And then he'd be like, oh, wow, that was easy. And I'm like, what? And then he's like, that test was like the easiest test. And I'm like, physical? Because he was actually a very physically active guy. He's like, no, like the written. He's like, it's too easy. So anyway, long story short, he became a cop. A year or 2 years later, we're just kind of talking. And then he's like, it was too easy to be a cop. And he's like, and I'm working with a bunch of morons. I just remember him saying that. So there's something, it's just too easy. It shouldn't be that easy. It should require some sense of like a judgment call to make the right decision in a situation where you have to react quickly.
And the thing that I don't see ever being tested from a training perspective, I haven't seen it, is the emotional intelligence.
That's huge.
Because that's what's really needed in these scenarios.
It's muted everywhere in society. People do not value emotional intelligence, but that's a whole different thing. But yes, in this regard, for sure.
Yeah. One thing that really helped me to like get my bearings was to watch this movie Just Mercy, and I had posted about it on social media as well. It just had so much heaviness on my mind and on my heart the last 2 weeks, and I ended up watching it with the kids. The kids watched it with me. Such an eye-opening movie.
I have to watch it. It's on our list for the weekend. I really want to watch it based on your recommendation.
Yeah, it was, for me, it was very eye-opening from the sense of what really happens and how the system is broken on multitude of different levels, but also for the kids to be able to see it and feel the emotion, because it's a Hollywood production, so they do a good job and the music and everything's right, and to kind of take you on a journey. And we all cried multiple times, but we cried like feeling a sense of relief, like, okay, this is why solidarity is so important. This is why we have to donate to Black businesses and we have to support the Black cause. And this is why Black Lives Matter as a movement is so important. And it's way too late, and yet it's right on time.
100%. Like, in order for us to make change, we have to acknowledge that this is a public health crisis and everyone has to speak out. And that's what we're seeing. Like, not just here, but all over the world.
Yeah. And we talked last time about and the racist and biased tendencies in South Asian culture.
Yeah.
So we talked about how South Asians can be anti-Black, they can be anti-Muslim. In some parts of South Asia, caste is something that's talked about quite a bit, and that can be like a version of divisiveness. But since then, there's been a lot of discussion about being anti-racist. Like, it's not enough to just be not racist. You have to be anti-racist. And I've been taking that really personally and like trying to figure out like, how can I do that? And I will just tell you, like, in my personal network, which during quarantine times is essentially just my family, but family and close friends, I've found myself more motivated than ever to actually stop people from making comments and correcting them. And they're not just like, it's not comments about just Black culture, but actually, like, sometimes we were talking about this last time about how sometimes people will make comments about someone who's darker or lighter. Like, if a kid's been playing in the sun a lot, they're like, oh, they'll make a comment. And I've actually had 3 instances, I'm practicing the muscle, I guess, where I've said, like, stop, that's not an appropriate comment, and we have to do better than that.
Good for you. I'm glad. We need to speak out. You're right. And then not just speak out in the way that I was saying with protests, but also like the everyday little conversations, what you're talking about. That's important.
Because it creates that, it creates that environment. And one of the comments was about, okay, interestingly enough, I'll share this one with you, was actually about me being interviewed for that news broadcast. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I didn't really think it was going to be that big of a deal. I failed to understand like the broadcast range, and the audience size. And so, I was dressed fine. I wasn't dressed up, but I was dressed fine. And I almost said to butt him, but I stopped myself. Almost said like, oh, I didn't even like put makeup on, maybe next time I should get my act together. And as soon as I started to say it, I was like, what was cool? I was like, I was there because of the content and the knowledge that I had to bring on the situation, and it didn't matter what I looked like. And the girls were there and they were like, that's good, Mama. Good job.
Oh, you said that in front of your girls? That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah, it was really, I was like, okay, I'm going to keep practicing.
That's important. I think that's really important. It's the way you see yourself that they're watching.
This is part of the messaging of the beauty activists that are out there who say another aspect of the system being broken is that the cosmetic and beauty industry is like made for tall, thin, white people, and that the rest of us really don't fit in.
No, it's true. Clothes, I always have to hem. Always.
Yeah. And so I'm like, how does that affect our children?
Yeah.
So I haven't figured it all out yet, but I'm practicing.
Yeah, and you know what? It's also important that our children watch us and that they practice. Quick story here. Allie had her presentation, like her final presentation for kindergarten a few days ago, which was online. So she had to kind of tell her favorite movie, her favorite, food, blah, blah. So she had her favorite book. So her favorite book is this book called Sulwe. Have you heard of that? Sulwe? It's by Lupita Nyong'o, the actress.
Oh, I love her. Yeah.
Yeah, she's awesome. Oh my God, amazing actress. So, she's very dark and she does not want children to feel the way she felt. So she wrote a children's book about that, about how this one girl was very dark and she was never as light as the other people and how she hated her dark skin. But obviously the story evolves and the girl learns to love her skin. So Allie's presenting this and she actually said it, like, it's my favorite book. And her audience, mostly white kids. And she's like, and I like the book because she learned to love her dark skin. And then you hear her teacher go, "Aw."
Oh, that's so sweet.
I mean, I teared up. I actually dropped the phone a little. I was like, oh my God. I felt good that minute because I was like, you know what? She received the message and she's giving the message. And I felt good.
It's like that little bit of hope that for us, we feel like it's chaos because we're changing the systems as we knew them, right? And anytime there's change, and even if it's something terrible, but something terrible that you lived with for many, many years, you become accustomed to it. And so that story just is a reminder that new things come with endings of one thing, beginnings for new things come, and that we can shape it. Like, it's not too late. Now we know better and we can do better.
Exactly.
Oh, Lisa, I'm so glad we were able to connect. So many things have been weighing heavily on me, and trying to figure out what to do next is never easy. But I think you and I have discovered, it's just the start of the conversation, and we have to keep on going and figuring out how we fit and how we can continue to uplift Black and other minorities and communities of color voices and really lean into what the Black community needs right now. To our listeners, let us know what you think. And as always, thanks for listening. We're going to leave you with Allie's wise words.
My favorite book is Solway, and it's about a girl who learns how to like her dark skin.